if we're all actors on a stage, sometimes there are eras which occur which make it feel as if that very stage that we are operating on is shifting underneath our feet. And I think it's fair to say that that's where we are now with the changes, economic shifts, technology shifts, political realignments underway. It's certainly never been anything like this in my lifetime, or any of our lifetimes, I'm 100% sure. So let's go into the ways that these shifts are changing the evolving expectations of organizations and societies. We will go, Your Excellency, I'll start with you. Actually, I'll give all three of you this one here. This is a broad one, but how must governments adapt? What are ways that governments can adapt in an era that is increasingly defined by things like cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and different one, but big, demographic changes? And I'll start with you, Excellency.
First of all, thank you for having us today again. I mean, the question, which is quite very broad, the way the government can adapt. We have to start by recognizing that 5, 10, 20 years from now, it's very difficult for us to predict how the labor market will be, what will be the pluses and what will be the minuses. And therefore, the more the government will be prepared through solid institutions. So building the institution, in my mind, is very, very critical. Secondly, you need institutions that are flexible, very much flexible and adaptable.
Yeah.
So that we could really adjust according to the what the future brings us. My last point is that what we are already drawing lessons from what we are already observing. And one of the key things that we are observing, maybe two things. One is that the productivity gain from the AI, which is a huge plus, does not necessarily translate into wage increase in the job, or how much the workers are earning. So the gap between the productivity gain and the job and the wages is widening. Yeah. So we may want to already take a measure now to preempt that in the future. And the last point is obviously we discussed it since yesterday as well, is the importance of investing in skills.
Yeah, and so what I hear there is that if we can't know what the future holds, then we've got to be flexible so that we can pivot toward whatever the flexibility or whatever the future may throw at us. Robyn, let me ask that same question of you. What are your thoughts on that topic?
So let me say something about what government should do looking inwardly and then outward. On the inward front, there is approximately a $1.75 trillion productivity opportunity if government harnesses AI to its potential. Now, there's squeezed public sector budgets everywhere. AI loves bureaucracy because so many of the tasks are repeatable, and governments need to run at that opportunity while also elevating and retraining their own people to do the more complex, silo-spanning, judgment-involving tasks. And it's a colossal challenge. And to the point about agility, training needs to be seen not only as a necessity to be ready for the next challenge that's coming around the corner, but I think of it as a muscle now. It's a muscle for change management. Unless you are retraining all the time, you don't have the capabilities you need to adapt. So it's a gym for change, and we all need to be going to that gym. On the external front, there's so many things to say about how governments can support labor market transitions. I think it's hard to talk about work without thinking about the future of livelihoods, economic security, and in particular, agency. And I'll just focus on this point for a second, because I think right now there is way too much talk about agentic AI compared with human agency, agentic humans. And if we have agency drained from humans at the expense of all going to the algorithms, that is a zero-sum dynamic, which is very problematic in society. And then one simple heuristic I'll end here for thinking through this. I found it one of the most helpful frameworks I've heard about this year is to consider, governments should consider, are people in the labor market below the algorithm or above the algorithm? Are they being managed and deployed by increasingly intelligent algorithms, for example, Uber drivers, or are they using these algorithms as tools to be more effective? And above the algorithm tends to greater agency.
Okay, you just said a lot there that I found very interesting, by the way. Can I ask you just to elaborate on a couple of things there? You said, if I heard you correctly, you said that AI loves bureaucracy. Please just elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, if you take the public service, and this is our speciality at Apolitical, we're a network for government. We're used by 500,000 public officials around the world, and our tools and training are available to a further 40 million on government platforms. So we are bureaucrat nerds, as it were. Now, about 30% of the tasks performed by the 200 million public servants are research and writing related. AI is very good at that. Equally, if you think of a lot of bureaucratic systems, you've got visa applications, as just one example, asylum applications. Now, the vast majority of those are very vanilla and straightforward and can be done algorithmically. And there's a real opportunity to pivot humans to the complex, knotty cases which require more judgment and expedite all the simple ones. So lots of frontiers on the bureaucratic algorithmic meeting.
So actually be able to deploy more people to the tougher cases and let the simple consular work get done by AI.
Exactly, and I think one of the mistakes that leaders everywhere are making, but especially we see this a lot in government, is that there is so much talk about automation and not nearly enough talk about augmentation. So the workforce goes into an either conscious or unconscious deer in the headlights paralysis, instead of thinking of these tools as ways to do your work better. And everyone focuses on budget, but let's ask ourselves this question. Public sector workforces seem huge and expensive, but if all of them were made 1.5x or 2x more effective, it would seem like a bargain by comparison.
Thank you. And David, I'll switch to you. Same question. In this era, how must workforces and how much leadership, I guess in particular, adapt?
Look, so we heard about the uncertainty and therefore the need for adaptability. We heard about risk and we heard about opportunity. For me, the most important thing leaders can do in government and the private sector is find a way of articulating an optimistic vision about the future. And optimism doesn't mean, in this case, being blind to some of the risks, because they're very real. But our ability to actually seize the opportunity and manage the risk is in itself a function of, do we look at this as a glass half full or a glass half empty kind of situation? I'll give you just one example. The latest Edelman Trust Barometer asks, among other things, people across the world, how optimistic are you that the next generation will be better off, that your children will be better off than you? In France, in the most recent survey, do you know how many people said they were optimistic? 6%. 6%. In this part of the world here in the UAE, it's more like 60 or 65%, right? And so when people aren't optimistic about the future, they become fearful, they don't invest in their own skills, they don't support experimentation. And so I think one of the most important things, as I said before, is governments have to articulate why we have the capabilities of managing the risks, why the opportunities clearly outnumber some of those risks, and mobilize, therefore, for institutional adaptability, for going to that skill gym and exercising so we can actually capture so much of the upside above the algorithm. I like that way of framing it.
Mm-hmm. And part of the way that we might judge whether we're better off or our children are better off than they are is we doing good work? good work, this type of thing that gives us gratification, right? The type of thing you feel like you're doing something that actually matters. What does good work look like? Again, and I'm going to give this to all three of you again, because you guys are coming at me with very different answers that I'm enjoying. Your Excellency, what is good work going to look like in the age of AI?
Well, if you allow me, I just want to react to this very good point that was making about the survey that was done, and with in France, you say 6%. Yeah. It would be good to see in Vietnam, for example, what was the percentage. I don't know if it's the same study. What is happening, let's be quite politically maybe incorrect here. If you look at the northern countries, they are very pessimistic.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you look at the southern, the optimism is very high. That AI will be the source for having a big jump. Just like we went from no cable phone, no line phone to cell phones on that. So that is quite very important to keep in mind that AI is a plus. We really need to establish that. Now, what good work will look like? Maybe the good work will be the one that you just sit in Jumeirah Beach and enjoying the day on that. But the heart of the matter, in ILO, what we are advocating, one is to capitalize on the productivity gain coming from the AI. And most of the repetitive jobs that we know, but at the same time start preempting. For example, right now, our data is quite very clear. Most repetitive jobs, women are predominant. And therefore, the fact that AI is picking up on the most repetitive jobs, it's widening the gap. And therefore, the challenge we still have 23% of women that are underpaid for equal work with men. So good work 20 years from now is the one that not only look at the hardship using AI to facilitate the hardship, gain productivity, gain economic wealth, at the same token, ensuring that the wages are decent and there's a minimum protection. Protection not only just in terms of occupational health and safety, the notion of occupational health and safety itself will evolve. So how do we move all of those along, not just looking at using an AI to just, we want to use AI to increase the bottom line, the profit and loss. That is something that we have to acknowledge. At the same token, we also want to acknowledge that those benefits are also the dividend, if I may say so, out of those are equally shared with the workers and with the community. So you need leadership in that direction.
I'm just forming a theory in my head right now, but that division between people who are optimistic and pessimistic, you talk about there being a gender division in the South. I think in the North, I'm from New York City. My friends who are in psychiatry and law are scared of AI. It scares them because they feel like my credential is about to get blown. And so I think that might have something to do with Japan and South Korea and Sweden and Germany having a different take on it, but I could be wrong. Sorry, thinking out loud there. Robyn, that question, what does good work look like in the future?
It's such an interesting one, and I think we're all kidding ourselves if we think we know the answer to that question, right? It's in some ways it's anyone's guess. As a principle, I think a sense of agency, back to what I said earlier, is really important. Without agency, all kinds of aspects of our psychology collapse. If I were to offer a maybe controversial take on the gender issue you mentioned, I think women may be more affected because of the repetitive task encroachment, but so much of the risk is going to come from the breakdown of identity as the half-life of jobs collapse. So you will no longer be able to get your sense of motivation and identity from a durable profession. And I suspect that might hit men on average somewhat harder. So in terms of good work, I think we're going to need to shift the motivational balance from extrinsic identity of your job to intrinsic, do you find meaning? And that requires a shift of the educational system, because our education system is linear, it's geared towards credentials, it is external by design, and that's not going to work very well. And we're going to leave people feeling naked, sort of professionally naked, which I think creates a lot of risks for societal unrest. Finally, I think it sort of relates to the below and above the algorithm point. The quality of entrepreneurship is going to become more and more important, whether it's you being entrepreneurial with your own business or as a sole trader, or intrapreneurial in an organization. Because in some respects, relying on a single source of income, even if you're in a great job in a great company, is the most dangerous position to be in, because your job could disappear. So good work, I think, is people who are able to rapidly reinvent themselves internally in an organization or externally and bring on board different sources of revenues to de-risk their economic security.
There's so many aspects to this, because when you say that, I think, okay, well, then you run to a division between younger people and older people who are less or perhaps more or perhaps less capable of doing those pivots. So again, it's going before I...
Sure.
Yeah, good.
Look, I mean, I agree 100% with what Robyn just said. There's a beautiful video that I sometimes show our participants in executive programs at IMD, and it's a cleaning lady speaking about her work. And so she's a cleaning lady on the cancer floor of a major hospital in the United States, and she talks about her work and why it fulfills her and how she gets to know the patients and why her work is so important, because when they're going through chemotherapy, they're very sensitive when it comes to it. It's an amazing video. If you haven't seen it, you should look at it. And it underscores the point that you just made. It isn't that the creative jobs are the good jobs and manual jobs are not, or small organizations are good and large organizations are not. It's, do you find meaning in what you do? Yeah. And that meaning comes from all kinds of sources. Therefore, helping people understand that what they should be seeking is knowing themselves what is important to them, and then find the kind of organization that helps them bring that out becomes critical. And that's really a responsibility that all of us have as leaders. One of the most important things that we can do is create the environment where people can find meaning in their work, in their contributions, whether it is with technology or without technology. And I think we have lots of opportunities there.
And self-direction, can I just make a comment? Yeah. We're still way too focused on content, and yes, content is being eaten by AI. AI is so much better at content, and we need to be focusing on the capability of self-mastery, and we're way under gearing our efforts there.
Going back to your point about agency, right?
Yeah, but it can also be taught. We mustn't think this is just something you're born
Absolutely.
with or not. It
Absolutely.
can be taught in an experiential way.
Yeah.
And you have segued very nicely into my next question, which was I was going to ask. Let's talk about organizational
Sure.
design. How do we build organizational design that will, if not foment, at least make it possible for these necessary changes in personnel to evolve and take place? Your Excellency, I'll give that one to you first.
Well, I think we have already touched on that. One is what we're talking in terms of having a human-centered approach. This is the bottom line, what it is. Mm-hmm. And we have already, we have been struggling already with that, not enough investment in ensuring that all the creativity, all the progress we are making in the intelligence, in the technology side, we keep the human at the center and the needs on that. When we talk about, for example, we know that there is an increase in the self-traders and the self-job creators, but they don't necessarily have protection that goes with that. So it's important to ensure that the way the organizational challenges and that we need to take into account, first of all, is the leadership. And the leadership should not be focusing on just knowing AI or what AI should bring. We have to make sure that we do have the fundamental, the foundational skill in place, and that we also have those kind of soft skill that we are not talking enough about. All of that are embedded in the organizational design and development as well.
Yeah.
We're about to do something really exciting, I think, in the future of organization. And I think everybody here in the room can relate to this. How many times have you been in a situation where there's been an amazing individual contributor in your team or your organization? You want to promote them and help them grow, and so you make them a manager. And then it turns out they're actually not very good at managing people, and you've now made them do something that they're not good at, and they're no longer doing the thing that they were good at before.
Yeah, you've lost that productivity
Correct,
that
right?
you had from them on the...
But the whole idea is to move forward, you got to be responsible for more people. So agents will create an opportunity for individual contributors to have much bigger impact than they had before without necessarily having to manage lots of people. So we're going to see people progressing through careers, being more senior in organizations without the kind of things that we traditionally associate with that, which is, responsibility for large numbers of people. And I just use that as one example to suggest that I think the way organizations will look like, the way people will find their place in those organizations is going to change pretty dramatically when suddenly your team or your potential team isn't just humans but also agents.
I could tell that you had something there that you wanted to go into.
Look, yeah.
So really agree with that, and I want to build on His Excellency's point about leadership and the earlier point about vision and storytelling. So in government, we see all the time that leaders are actually getting left behind when it comes to the technology versus their workforce. And the further behind they get, the harder it is for them to ask what they see to be dumb questions about the technology and to figure out a language to speak about this disruption in a way that's coherent and can bring people with them. So leadership training is a critical priority right now, and it needs to happen in safe spaces behind closed doors. That's essential. And then just to offer perspective on work, we focus a lot, again, our lens is government, but I think this applies somewhat everywhere, in what might be the middle of the sandwich, the role descriptions, the titles that people have. And we miss the pieces of bread on either side, which are actually more important. From the bottom up, it's what happens at the task and workflow level, because that is the level at which AI is injected into a system, not at roles. AI doesn't care about roles, it cares about tasks, and we don't know those on the whole. And we've actually built a platform to map the workforce and its activities at the task and workflow level, and then figure out on that basis, that very bottom-up granular basis, where to harness AI to augment humans. So it's much more human-centered, it's much more data-driven. So that's the bread on the bottom of the sandwich. And then the piece of bread on the top is the cultural tenets of this change. What principles we want to survive and to infuse culture. So we've spoken about agency, there's vision at the leadership level. We have a leadership principle in Apolitical called builder energy, and that's the ability to build stuff as a way of navigating a changing and uncertain environment. It's kind of linked to the entrepreneurial point, and I think all organizations need to think about those high-level principles to keep as North Stars or direction guides.
Yeah.
There's so many definitions of leadership. The one that I like the best is the simplest one, which is leadership is about two things. It's direction and energy, right? And so we go back to how do you articulate a vision for the future that energizes people? How do you give people meaning in their work? How do you provide them with the tools, the safe space for learning? And that really is where the focus needs to be, not what is the skill that you should learn right now. If you had asked that question 18 months ago, everybody would have said, you need to learn prompting. Well, it turns out we didn't need to learn prompting because the tools
they were just
themselves
saying
now.
that a couple months
Look,
ago.
I mean, I lived close to where you're from in Connecticut, and we felt like terrible parents because we didn't send our kids to coding school on weekends. Turns out it was actually good to send them to the playground and to play soccer instead. So we don't know really what some of those skills will be. What we do know is your ability to paint a positive picture, energize people, provide them with an environment where they can learn in a safe space and experiment and fail, that for sure is going to be really, really important.
Thanks a lot to all of you for being here for this one. Can I get a round of applause for these folks, everybody? Gilbert Houngbo, Robyn Scott, and David Bach, thank you very much.